Welcome back to .NET Rocks. This is Carl Franklin.
And this is Richard Campbell.
And we're here for an hour of creativity goodness.
Yes, yes, yes.
Creativity.
So excited.
Denise Jacobs here. We're going to be talking to her in just a few minutes. But first, how's the Great Northwest, Mr. Campbell?
Spring has sprung. The grass is riz. I wonder where the birdies is.
Is that Ogden Nash or something?
Yeah, something like that. Jeez, learned that in grade school. But yeah, the birdies are all around. The dog had a close encounter with an otter.
What?
We got this pond up at the boathouse. And, there was an otter in the pond when we went by.
You have the Keith Richards of dogs. He just won't die.
He's fine. He's 12. He's very fit.
Yeah.
I managed to grab him before he went into the water after the otter, because that is unwise.
Yeah.
And, I think it was a mutual scared the snot out of each other moment. But I'm like, holy crap, that's an otter.
Well, I don't have any wildlife spottings to report, except last summer, we did have a red-tailed hawk that landed right on our back porch.
Oh, on your deck.
Yeah.
That's cool.
That was kind of interesting.
They're vicious-looking things when you get up close to them, too. That's a serious set of claws.
Yeah. So, all right, enough about that.
Nice.
We have something interesting for Better Know a Framework today, so roll the music.
Awesome. All right, dude, what do you got?
So, I went looking in the app stores to see if I could find the top-rated app for, getting rid of creative backflow. Let's call it that. And this is called OFlow. And if you go to oflowapp.com, OFLOW app.com. So these are sort of like flashcards, right? It's created to help you get unstuck.
I get it. When you got writer's block.
Yeah, proven creativity techniques. And, you can do this in a much easier way just by flipping open a dictionary and, pointing your finger to something. But, just random words. Or, just type random stuff into Google and see what happens. I mean, there's so many ways to get ideas that we're probably going to talk about this with Denise. But
have you ever played the Wikipedia game for that? That's always good for that.
What is that, a drinking game?
Just go to any page on Wikipedia, make note of what that page is, or even bookmark it, and then keep clicking on links that page references, and then read that one and click on the next link and see how many times it takes for you to get back to the page you started from.
Oh, that's an interesting game.
It's like 6 or 7. It's right out of like the 7 Degrees of Kevin Bacon.
Huh.
But what's interesting is the weird routes you can go through to get back.
Right. Well, anyway, I haven't used this app, but I only bring it up because it's highly rated, and a lot of people left very good comments about it. So, might be one of those things to just check out sometime.
Nice.
Yeah.
Good one.
So, who's talking to us, Richard?
Grabbed a comment off of show 1025.
Wow.
From August of 2014, 3 years ago, Getting Creative with Denise Jacobs. Yep. Lots of great comments on this show, actually. Yeah. But it was Jehu Hidez, which I believe is a Mexican name, who said, I found the podcast refreshing in the sense that creativity and its potential techniques and heuristics have not been stressed enough when it comes to the education of professional developers and software engineers. I find that developers are some of the most creative people I've ever had privilege to work with. But it's usually creativity amassed from painful experiences in the trenches, not the happy result of a formal and systemic way to prepare your career.
Yeah.
Having said that, I'm certainly no expert, but I do believe there are many creative techniques and practices that can be imported and transplanted from other disciplines, design, psychology, creative writing, and so forth, over to development.
Yeah.
Creativity is a subject inherently connected with other important engineering aspects such as problem solving and critical thinking, and those two are rather fertile grounds for getting techniques and practices in play. Thank you for providing a podcast that's not just about technology, but also the other aspects of software engineering.
Yeah.
Yeah, and here we do more of that. So thank you for your comment, Jehu.
Yeah.
And a .NET Rocks mug is on its way to you. And if you'd like a .NET Rocks mug, write a comment on the website at .NETRocks.com or via any of our social media, because we published every show to Facebook and Google+. And if you comment there and we read it on the show, we'll send you a mug.
And definitely follow us on Twitter. He's at Rich Campbell. I'm at Carl Franklin. And send us a tweet. We roll him up in tie-dye nori.
Where did that come from?
I'm just trying to be creative, my friend.
You can't tie-dye, Nori. That's just wrong.
Hey,
I'm trying to play along here.
Don't limits on it.
That's
no
right.
negativity. There you
You're
go.
You're harshing my mellow, man.
Yeah, dude.
Must be all that tie-dyed Nori in your life.
Put a couple drops of patchouli oil on it. Now you got a dead show right there.
Keep the music out of your eyes.
That's right. And that voice you're hearing is that of Denise Jacobs. She is a speaker, author, and creativity evangelist who speaks at conferences and consults with companies worldwide. As the founder and CEO of The Creative Dose, she promotes techniques to unlock creativity and spark innovation in people, teams, and workplaces, particularly those in the tech world. Denise is the author of Banish Your Inner Critic, the premier the premier handbook on silencing fears to unleash creativity. She's also the founder of Rock the Web, that's RAWK, and the head instigator of the Creativity Evolution. How do you say that when you say that? Because it's an R in parentheses.
I just say revolution.
Oh, okay.
But it's like then I explain it afterwards.
So it's kind of like a conversation piece.
It is a conversation piece, kind of like a doily on a table, but better.
And it actually worked this time because I asked you what it was. Now we're talking about it.
See?
Nice.
See?
There is a method to my madness.
So tell us about this book. I'm a big fan of getting rid of fear in general, but
Excellent.
You seem to be an expert at it.
At this point in time, 350 pages later, yes, I am.
Yeah, that's a particular kind of fear, isn't it? I had to do that a couple of times.
Write a book?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, that was kind of actually writing a book was what prompted me into this whole kind of realm of creativity and dealing with the inner critic, and figuring out how to silence the inner critic so that you could let creativity flow.
Yeah.
And that started with writing my first book, which was the CSS Detective Guide. And it was kind of after I wrote that book and was doing the website for it that I had this kind of went into this just incredible flow state. And then afterwards thought, God, that was so good. If I could figure out how to kind of bottle that up in a way of speaking and help other people feel like that, then that's what I want to do with my life. Like that's what I want to do for work.
Yeah.
And so basically from that point in 2010, kind of up to, let's say, about 2014 or 2015, I started talking about the inner critic and creativity and stuff. And it really resonated with people. And so I can't remember if it was 2014 or if it was the beginning of 2015. Anyway, I was like, it's time to actually write a book. Like I had written an article that came out on a list apart in 2011. Really great response to that. Then I wrote another article in 2014 about perfectionism and procrastination. Really good response to that. Then I was like, let's just take all of this stuff and and expand it and find out, delve into this more and actually make a handbook, because there's really no book that talks about all of this stuff like specifically for creativity. Like,
yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
sure.
And there actually at this point, it seems like it's weird. Like I just looked on Amazon and it seems like there's like a trillion, million, billion new books about inner critic, like that have just come out in the last 6 months. And I'm just like, y'all trying to get up in my game.
Well, what I like about your stuff is that you include the latest science and practices that, for mindfulness and things. And you sort of incorporate that. It's not just a sort of, a Stuart Smalley kind of self-help thing, that'd be the easy way out.
Right. No, it is definitely, there's definitely, I put a lot into this and I was actually, kind of starting writing a blog post this morning, and I didn't really know exactly how it was all going to come together when I first started writing it. I had all of the, I know I'm going to talk about these topics, right? And, just to backtrack for a hot minute, I do this exercise that I got from our friend, Jessie Sternschus.
Yep.
I was just thinking of her too.
Our little love. She told me about this exercise that she does at conferences. And I was like, oh, snap, I'm totally going to use that. So what I started doing, is particularly in the Banish Your Inner Critic keynotes and talks that I was giving, was I would give everybody a piece of paper. And I would say, write down your biggest fear around creativity. And they write it down on their thing. I said, don't sign it. Don't put Love Jim on it. Like, don't put your Twitter handle on it or your email address. Just it's totally anonymous. Just write down your biggest fear around creativity and then take that piece of paper and crumble it up in a ball. And when we're ready on 3, we're going to throw the ball across the room.
Yeah.
And so we had this snowball fight. And so at first it was just an exercise to kind of show people how universal these fears are.
Right.
But then I started, I was like, I'm curious, here I am up on stage and I'm talking and everything. And I have people, probably 5, 6, 7 people read out what they got,
Yeah.
But then I was like, I actually want to know what people said. So I started actually gathering them up after the talks and keeping them. And I did that over the course of about a year. And what I ended up finding was that there are these patterns that basically it was universal and they started being in categories. And these were categories that actually I didn't feel like people were actually talking about as an actual thing. Like you hear about perfectionism all the time. You hear about procrastination all the time. You hear about imposter syndrome all the time. And I talk about those in my talk. But what you don't hear about so much is what's it called when somebody feels like they're not good enough or they don't know enough or they don't learn fast enough or they don't have enough knowledge, right?
Yeah.
Or everything they do isn't quite good enough. What is that called? And so, what's it called when you're comparing yourself to people all the time? Yeah. What's it called when you're like, I'm just not creative?
Yeah.
Right. And those things were popping up time and time and time again. And so I actually, in the course of writing this book, it was this process of discovery because I actually found that these things were such strong categories that I actually gave them names. So when people have this kind of not enough, I'm not enough, I don't know enough, etc., I call it deficiency anxiety. And when somebody feels, thank you, I try. And when somebody gets into this mode of God, all these people have done all these amazing things and I'm a total slacker, even though they're not, right? Or I'm not this person, I work with this team of really talented people. I don't know how I got there, right? Right. Then I call that comparison syndrome. And I have something when people are just like, oh, I'm totally not creative. Like Josue's comment where he was like, developers are some of the most creative people on the planet. Mm-hmm. And yet if you talk to a developer, they'll say, no, I'm not creative. I'm analytical.
Right. Or I know this guy that's creative and I like working with him.
Right. I know this guy who's creative. He does all this stuff. Or we work with designers. I don't know how they do that. But then it's if somebody whispers the idea slightly of something that you could potentially build and turn into an application, that person will just go and come back and say, okay, here, I built this. And it's just what the what? Yeah. Right. So I call that when somebody basically denies the fact that they're creative, I call it creativity denial. And so
I don't know where you come up with these names, Denise. It's confusing.
I know.
Yeah, they are very confusing. Yes. Yeah.
It's very obscure. Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of, they obfuscate instead of clarify, but I figure people can work with me on them. And so I've come up with actually some new terminology, some new terms for things that actually exist already. Oh my God, you guys.
What?
So you're talking about wildlife sightings.
Yes.
There's a peacock in my backyard.
What?
You heard me.
It is Friday.
Is it plaid?
No, it's a female peacock, and we have one of them, at least one of them in the neighborhood. I think now we have probably 3.
Wow.
But because I don't know the difference between them, I just call her Fred.
Wait, nice. I'll write some music for it real quick. And then here comes the coyote. Bum, 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 bum,
No.
No. Okay.
Okay, I don't know what just happened there, but I'm sure it was creative.
So I have a peacock in your art. Anyway, sorry, I just got excited.
Everybody should have a peacock in their backyard.
I totally agree.
You know what? It's actually funny when you guys were talking about the wildlife stuff. I was going to be like, "There's a peacock that like runs around our neighborhood." I didn't know she was going to come. I didn't realize I had invoked her.
Oh yeah,
that's great.
See, that's the power of creativity. Anyway, so back to what I was saying. So in my book, instead of talking about the kind of typical things that people talk about with the inner critic, like perfectionism, procrastination, and imposter syndrome, I actually talk about something that I call judgment dread, the fear of being judged, high self-criticism. I talk about deficiency anxiety, overwhelm, obstruction, creativity denial, comparison syndrome, all things that are very, very relevant and very real, but that people don't really have terminology for. Cool. So hoping to be introducing new terminology into the kind of greater lexicon. So let somebody be like, dude, I was totally in judgment dread.
Yeah.
And be like,
nice.
Dude,
I like that.
Right?
And, you know, it's how you give power over these thoughts is to give them labels, give them names.
Oh,
right.
Yep. And then get distance from them that way.
Yeah.
Instead of saying, this is me doing this, you can say, oh, this is my inner critic.
Yeah.
Doing this. And then you've got, these are not my thoughts. These are thoughts that, this is kind of this system that's working, this kind of, I call it a protective threat to self system that basically works, that kicks into gear when it gets triggered. And then you can say, oh, okay, I see that the system is going on.
Yeah.
But I don't have to just like go into autopilot and be in this. I can actually have some distance and some perspective, and then I can actually choose to think different thoughts.
It's a very famous story, and I may have brought it up before in the last time we talked, and tell me if I did, but even if I did, it's worth repeating.
Okay.
Sir Paul McCartney was talking about the idea for Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, which, on the scale of creativity is off the charts, right?
Right.
And they were the Beatles were sort of stuck in this rut of the Fab Four, and everything that they did was around that whole mop top, the music that they had done in their early years. And then they had started experimenting with drugs and stuff, and everybody was sort of turning up their nose at them. So they just decided to jump in to the whole creative rethink the band. And I think it was Paul's idea, who said, you know what? Our next album, we're not going to do it as the Beatles. We're going to come up with this fictional band that, we are going to play the parts of those people, and we'll all have these personas, and we won't ask ourselves, what would the Beatles do? We'll ask, what would they do? What would these guys do on this album if there was no limits? You were starting from scratch, and, the sky's the limit. And they found that was like just the distance, like you're talking about, Denise, getting some distance from, the things that you identify with and the things that you identify as your own self. How would this fictional person do it? So, I think of guys like Mark Miller, who has this superhero persona. He sort of lives in that mode a lot, and that sort of allows him to overcome things that Mark Miller wouldn't do, but what would, superhero Mark Miller do?
Right.
There's a lot to learn there.
But it's important, and it can be like a really useful tool, right? Like that people can kind of overcome things when they kind of let go of the concept of who they think they are, right? Yeah. And when you really think about it, all we are is this kind of amalgamation of beliefs about who we are, but this doesn't necessarily mean that that's who we are, right? Or not necessarily. And the beliefs about who we are may not have even come from us.
That's right.
Probably didn't originate from us. We took them on from other people. It's what people told us we were,
right,
and not necessarily who we actually are. So,
yeah.
And there's no point I see in this book where you're actually questioning anybody's ability to be creative. It's like, no, You're just in your own head.
Yep.
Don't worry. It's there. You just have to let it out.
Exactly. Which is so true, right? Because I feel like the other thing too, and I say this kind of at the beginning, is that there's a stigma, or there's kind of this limitation about this limited concept of what is creative in our society, right? And that's how people can fall into that creativity denial, is they can say, well, I'm not a visual artist, a musician, or a writer. Or a dancer, maybe, if they, want to get like crazy, and it's like, well, that's such a small percentage, that's such a small slice of creativity and who's creative and what that even means, And so one of the things that one of the presumptions that I have in this is that, of course you're creative. You just need to like get all the stuff out of the way so that you can like actually experience that, and you need to figure out where it is, how it is that you're creative. It's not a question of if you're creative. It's a question of how you're creative.
Right. How you let it out in one form or another.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Denise, give us a sec here to pay the bills.
This episode of .NET Rocks is made possible in part by Windows on the Google Cloud Platform.
You may not know this, but the Google Cloud Platform supports Windows Server 2008, 2012, and 2016.
It also supports SQL Server versions 2012, 2014, and 2016 standard, web, and enterprise editions with high availability.
You can deploy your ASP.NET Windows apps to Compute Engine or your ASP.NET Core apps to App Engine or Container Engine. That's Google's hosted Kubernetes environment.
.NET and .NET Core libraries are there for all 200 plus Google.com and cloud services in NuGet, led by John Skeet of Stack Overflow fame.
But what about Visual Studio integration? Oh, it's there. You can use Visual Studio to manage your GCP resources and deploy your existing apps.
You get stack driver logging, error reporting, and tracing support for .NET and .NET Core.
PowerShell commandlets for GCP, which run on Windows and Linux.
And a great set of partners to bring your Windows and .NET workloads to GCP, including Capgemini, Nudesic, and Magenic.
So go to gcp.netrocks.com and get your free trial today.
Of course, you bring this up right away in the book, right? It's like every child has this incredible creative streak. I don't want to say that society beats it out of them, but what happens that we sort of struggle with it after we're not children anymore?
Well, society kind of does beat it out. I mean, like, go ahead and say it. I don't, we're all friends here.
We're okay with that.
We all know the drill.
We're just going to blame the man.
We're going to blame the man. And there's so many of them we can blame. But yeah, it's, school systems and things like that are not, most of them are not structured in a way that supports creativity. And then, most of the time it's like, don't daydream, don't look this, don't do that. Here's the right answer. And this is the only way that it can be done.
Right.
Blah, 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 blah. So, in a lot of ways there's that. And then there's like people who, a lot of the people who are in charge of education and stuff like that may be people who were frustrated creatives on their own and who were given very, very poor counsel. Were basically scared into the idea that there's no way that they could actually support themselves being creative.
Yeah.
And so then they're going to pass down those messages as well, right?
Right.
And if they see anybody, it's like their fear of like, oh my God, this child is not going to be able to make it in the world. And so they're like, okay, let's just suppress it. Let's suppress it right now.
Right.
We're saving them, really.
We're saving them, but it's like, no, actually, you're just making it so that they have to get more therapy. Or it's going to just take longer. It's just going to take longer for people. I think sometimes it takes longer for people than just to get to where they were naturally going to go anyway, or they have to like end up like working their way back to it. And it's like, God, what a waste of time.
So I'd like to compare writer's block to, songwriter's block to a sort of out of ideas block as a software developer, right?
Mm-hmm. Same thing.
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
It's the same thing.
It's not any different.
Yeah.
It's not any different.
I've recently started a three-piece original group with some really great players. And I just put it on myself that I'm going to write some tunes. And these songs are going to be more of me than particular songs that I've written before. So
nice.
The way I've ended up doing this process, which turned out to work really well, was I just went into the studio and I put a microphone in front of my amplifier and I just turned it on. And maybe I had a metronome or something like that. And I just played licks. I just played riffs, like all the stuff that's in my head. It's not necessarily somebody else's music. It's probably an amalgam of all the things that I've been practicing, it just all these little things. And then when I find something that sticks that I want to play again, I'll play it again. And it's those things that if I just modified it a little bit this way, and then I play it again and play it again, and then pretty soon I've got enough to make a tune out of and a melody. And that's sort of just like the whole idea of throwing spaghetti against a wall to see what sticks, right? You're just throwing stuff out there, seemingly unrelated things, and then seeing if you can make connections between them. And you could do that with tools, technologies, languages, right, Richard?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just thinking about spaghetti sticking to the wall because, if one's going to stick, they're all going to stick.
I guess you're right.
But I'm thinking also that is part of that is kind of the kind of process of playing, right?
Yeah,
that lack of judgment, that kind of allowing, giving yourself permission, like, I don't know what's coming. Like, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't have to plan this out or map this out. Like, kind of going on this kind of explorational process,
right?
Of starting out and saying, I don't know what I'm going to make.
You could, for example, take a bunch of patterns and, just go through the patterns, thinking about what your end goal of your software is, figuring out which ones fit, which ones don't, and you might stumble across the perfect one. It doesn't mean you're going to use them all just for the sake of using them, but you sort of have to, plow your way through them to understand what they do and how they fit within the context of what you're trying to do.
Exactly. And then there might be some way to like solve a problem that you didn't see. Like you see one thing, like you said, it's kind of a series of things that have influenced you over time, right?
Yeah.
So if you have those kind of little snippets of code, or if you have like that one like elegant solution that you saw that you're just like, holy snap, that was really clever. I'm going to keep that in mind for something else. Or like, I didn't know that like that can solve a lot of different problems.
Yeah.
Right. And then you can take those and put them together. And like you said, you don't necessarily need to know exactly how they're going to fit.
Yeah.
At the beginning, but trusting that you will find something and that they will fit, I think is like half of the battle.
Oh, right? Yeah, absolutely. Well, that just gets you to halfway, and then you can, you let your solution carry you the rest of the way.
Sure.
And one of the things I found with writing this book, and also kind of allowing myself something called process time, which is like creative playtime, right? Unstructured creative playtime for at least 15 minutes a day, is that that I really became much more comfortable with the process of not knowing when I sat down, but trusting that something will reveal itself somehow during the process. And being okay with not trying to make myself, not putting the pressure on myself to figure it all out ahead of time.
Right.
But to say, okay, like, I don't know. Like, one of the things I do, it is not software development. It is earring making. And I make jewelry to relax, as one does.
Wow.
I started doing this a lot when I was writing the book, when I would kind of get into these places where my thinking started feeling stifled. And there's a whole body of research actually about how working with your hands actually really stimulates creative flow. It's pretty amazing. So I had a writing coach, and she was like, start making something with your hands. And I was like, earrings! I just got permission to make earrings. This is amazing. And when I started sitting down and doing it, I kind of was in this thing of like, what am I going to make? And I just kind of let myself, explore and like put things together and see how things worked. And it was such an important part of the process. It profoundly affected my writing, because it got to the point where, like, when I went to write, instead of being like, I need to know exactly what I'm going to say, to be like, I don't know. Let's find out. Let's find out what's in there.
Yeah.
And so I like the fact that I really learned that on a very visceral level, and that's something that I can apply to other things. I'm trying to apply it to life. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
I had a year like that once, Denise.
What's the one you just didn't know?
When it didn't work,
Yeah. I've had several years like that. And still recovering from it, I think. But yeah, so, I think that is an important thing. And again, kind of getting back to like how you're creative versus if you're creative. One of the things I recommend to people is like just looking at those instances where you do get into a really profound state of flow, when things feel like they're just clicking and you're super excited about what you're doing and you're getting more ideas and you lose time and you don't really care about doing anything else. And that can be in a lot of different instances. It could be if you're developing something. It could be if you're making furniture. It could be if you're making music. It could be planning an event, right? It could be a lot of different things.
We're always making something, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is, but it is.
Yep. I lose whole days working on a Geek Out script.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they sort of poke me like, were you going to eat today?
Yep.
And you're like, what?
I'm reading a scientific paper and I'm really happy. Why would you stop that?
Yeah.
Right? Exactly. And that's like one of those plays. That's where you're brilliant, right? Yep. And people don't like to use the term brilliance, but I'm like, this is definitely a good place for it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. If not, then when, right?
Right? And if not taking ownership of it, why not? Why wouldn't you?
Well, Richard.
Yeah, buddy.
Guess what time it is now?
It must be that happy time again.
Yeah, it's time to explore the space. The space between my ears. Where eddies of thought swirl into colors. Man, I can't wait for the drugs to wear off.
I was going to say the space where my voice goes all squeaky from the helium, but okay.
It's actually time to give away a D-Experience subscription from DevExpress to one lucky member of the .NET Rocks fan club. Become a UI superhero with DevExpress UI controls and libraries, and deliver elegant .NET solutions that address customer needs today, and leverage your existing knowledge to build next-generation touch-enabled solutions for tomorrow. Whether it's an Office-inspired application or a data-centric analytics dashboard, DevExpress Universal ships with everything you'll need to build your best without limits or compromise. Learn more and download your free 30-day trial at devexpress.com/superhero.
Well, all right, buddy. Who's our winner?
Today's winner is Heath Higgins.
Congratulations, Heath.
Yeah.
Yay, Heath.
Yay, Heath.
All clap for you, sir.
And Heath just won the D-Experience subscription, a big pile of awesome from DevExpress, just for being a member of the .NET Rocks fan club. And if you don't know what that is, go to .NETRocks.com, click on the big Get Free Stuff button, answer a few questions, and join the .NET Rocks fan club. We have thousands of members all over the world, and every show we like to give away stuff from our sponsors. And every December we give away a $5,000 technology shopping spree to one lucky member of said fan club. But you have to sign up to win, of course. And Denise, it's your turn. You know what's coming. You've got $5,000. You're going shopping for technology, or maybe it's creativity. I don't know. What are you going to buy with $5,000?
Well, I was thinking about it, and actually, since you mentioned it, I would buy. It can be multiple things, right?
Yeah, many things.
Okay, good. So I'm going to go on a shopping spree. The first thing I would buy is probably a new computer, because it seems like that is starting to be something that I need to have. But after that, that's not actually going to take care of that much money. But what I would really like to do, which it may end up happening this year, is because I've been so into jewelry making, I want to take jewelry making classes. Like, I want to learn how to do like the forging. I want to learn how to work with silver.
Yeah.
All this stuff. And so when I was in Australia, actually last year, I was looking for a jewelry making workshop to take, and there's one in Miami, but I found this studio and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. Where is it? It's in the Philippines.
Ooh, wow.
And I was like, I would love to take a trip to the Philippines and go and hang out and just take classes at this workshop for like a week.
Yeah.
That's cool. And, and the sort of the other side of the world too.
It sort of is the other side of the world.
Yeah.
So maybe after NDC Australia, maybe Sydney, I can work in a little jaunt up to the Philippines. I don't know. I think that probably would cover most of it. You know, like a really nice hotel, a really nice flight.
I don't know as if anybody has ever said that they wanted to go on a trip.
Or to take a class that happens to be the other side of the world. I don't need more stuff. I'm all about experiences.
Yeah.
But, that's such a good idea.
Great idea.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So what else can we say about creativity and why we need it in the first place?
I think because in a lot of ways, creativity is going to be kind of how we get ourselves out of the cesspool that we've put ourselves in as humans. I mean, the world's got a lot of problems that need to be solved. And as Einstein has so aptly said, you can't solve a problem with the same mindset that created it.
Yes.
And the same mind frame that created it. And so one of the reasons I started working with creativity was because of that experience of going into a flow state and everything. Not only was it a profound experience, but I felt empowered afterwards.
Yeah.
Like I felt like anything that I wanted to do that I put my mind to, I could do. I felt like I had tapped into this wellspring of personal power that I had never felt before. And I felt so much more capable and so much more confident about myself and my abilities. And in my mind, when people really get in touch with their creativity and they start really like owning and expressing their creativity, they tap into that.
Yeah.
They tap into that feeling of being empowered. They tap into that sense of what I set my mind to, I can do, and that I can actually affect things in the world around me.
Right.
And so one of the reasons that's all of this stuff is a big deal for me, and I'm so, that I've become a self-proclaimed creativity evangelist, is creativity is part of the goal, but what creativity creates is really what I want to proffer, is really what I'm trying to cultivate with people. I'm trying to get people to feel more empowered so that they can make changes in the world around them, so that people can use their creativity to solve big, hairy problems that we have.
You know, there's a little bit of irony in the fact that people always say, I like to think out of the box, because they always say that. That has become like the mantra, isn't it? Think out of the box. It is, but it's not all that creative of a phrase.
It isn't that creative of a phrase. And frankly, people do better creatively when they have constraints.
Right.
That's right.
You do better work when you have fewer, sometimes when you have fewer resources, when you have fewer things at disposal, when you figure out what you can use that's around you.
Yeah.
Right? That what is at your disposal, what's at your behest. And so actually thinking inside of the box is more of a thing, is actually much more powerful.
Yeah. And redefining the box, right?
Redefining the box. Like, what is there actually a box? Is the box square? Maybe the box is round. Maybe it's a tall box.
But you know what I mean? Like here's a perfect example of of creating constraints based on things that may seem completely arbitrary and random, but just finding a way to link them together. You know, I think of all those great episodes of Chopped. You know, that show Chopped, that's on the Food Network, and they essentially give, you have 20 minutes to make an appetizer using salmon skin, cranberries, and Munster cheese. Go. Wow. You know, it's like you give somebody Ruby and Azure Functions and and Twitter. Go do something with that. Go. Right. Give yourself some random constraints that you may not have put together in the same box. Throw them in the box and try swimming.
Yeah. Yeah. And see what you make of it. Like, what can you construct with that? And I think a lot of times that's really when we push the limits of our creativity. It's not when you have unlimited choices. It's when you have limited choices.
Right.
Yeah.
Limited options.
And the reality is we always have limited choices. I almost wonder if the reason we struggle with box and constraints these days is because this civilization does have so much now. We used to be much more naturally constrained because there was a bigger resource limitation. Now that we're actually banging up against where the constraint is what the planet can sustain, it's almost more than you can put in your head.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And it is of our doing. It's like, okay, let's figure this out. Like, there's a lot of brain power amongst us. If we could get past thinking about like mundanities, like things that are just, just not as important. It's like, we've got actually we've got like a big charge here, like a larger charge.
We're busy creating a lot of small, dumb problems for ourselves when there's actually some big, serious problems we should be dealing with. It's almost a way to avoid working on the hard ones.
Yeah. 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 It's procrastination.
Procrastination can be actually a good thing, though. If you have a big project that is, let's say, due in 2 weeks, that's usually when you think of that thing that you really wanted to do that you knew would, juice your creativity, but you've been holding yourself back at, you know what I'm saying? We all do this, right?
It can be. Yeah.
But if you spend a little time doing that, that thing, whatever it is, a small task that, you're using it to procrastinate with a big task, but maybe that's what you need to do. Maybe you need to complete something small before you tackle something big.
Absolutely. And then you need to take the big thing and to split it into smaller bits.
Yeah.
There's something called structured procrastination, which is, taking your top 3 kind of important things that you need to do and going between the 3 of them, working on all of them, like when you need to switch tasks, switch to the second most important one. And when you're kind of, saturated with that one, then to switch to the third one. You may not have gotten all of them done, but you made progress on all of them.
You moved all the needles.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I'm not a big list maker, but I get the idea that making lists just gets you thinking about the space rather than doing the work itself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I do find I live in OneNote, and for a lot of like geek outs and creative things and even show topics in general, I just dump. Just write things down in no order. Don't worry about that. Or order is actually a different mindset.
Yeah, right.
It is actually. Yeah.
And often it comes like the next day. I'm just going to dump all this and then walk away from it. Tomorrow I'll sort it and it'll stimulate some new ideas.
Yeah.
I want to press against something a little less pleasant. Like, you take on some harder subjects in your book, like learning from envy. I love that you just take that on. We have it. How do we use it constructively?
Yeah, it's really important. Because that was one of the things I really like about this book is that that I do tackle some stuff that's like may not be something that everybody talks about, but that's there, right? Envy's there. People I get envious like all the time. And it's really important to know how to like not have something like that take you over in a negative way, but like actually learn tools, learn skill, learn a methodology for transforming that into something that can help you move forward instead of that can keep you stifled and stagnant in the same place.
So a way to deal with it without just suppressing it that turns it into something constructive.
You turn it into, what can I take from this, right? What can I learn from this to be better myself?
How can I learn from this person that I'm envious of? How can I take their example and make it something that can move me forward instead of me sitting in this place of like, why does this person have something that I want? that I feel like I should have. It's like, okay, how what has this person done? And how can I use that as potentially a template? And I also say that it's really important to like look at what a person's done and to also make sure that you see it within the context of that person. I used to like try to do things that other people did, like just emulate them, like almost mimic them to try to achieve the same kind of success that they had. And one of the things I had learned recently, Jesse actually helped me learn this, is that sometimes things don't work for you because they really just work for that person because they just fit that person, right? Yeah. And so that's been really helpful for me to kind of look at my own kind of feelings of envy and say, oh, wait a minute, I am comparing apples to oranges.
Right.
Like that person's success, they've got this whole kind of, setup that's very different from me. We're not the same person. We haven't had the same experiences, but, what can I take out of what they've done or their process? And how can I take that and adapt it to who I am and what works for me and see if that's something that'll work.
I do appreciate that the transformation of envy is into admiration.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That by going and pursuing that and understanding that in a deeper way, understanding what appealed to you enough that it made you feel that way, you come to admire that person. That's a really constructive way to deal with something that's, potentially quite negative and can be all consuming.
Thank you. Yes. And then also too, it's like, again, like, being envious doesn't really help you, but when you start to support other people and applaud them, it's kind of like, again, you shift the energy, you shift the feeling and the sensation, and you move it from this thing that really only affects you. Right. Like it's not hurting you. It's like when they say, when you're angry or when you're jealous or when you're envious, it's like basically like taking poison twice.
No, it's true. Yeah.
It's not, it doesn't hurt the other person at all. They're just like, oh, hey, what? Right. It only affects you. So it's really about, making it so that it's better. You're putting yourself in a better place.
Yeah.
What's a constructive way to deal with admiration? Like I see a lot of remarkably capable people who are very uncomfortable with accolades.
Yeah.
You mean with receiving it or giving them?
I would say both. Let's talk about receiving because I think it's the one that's the most awkward for a lot of folks.
I think a lot of times people don't receive stuff because they don't feel like they deserve it.
Right.
And that's kind of, that's a whole thing of, I think when you're not sure of it yourself, right? When you kind of are suspicious or you're having that, kind of internally, outside, you're just like, yeah, I did this thing. But inside, you're just like, did I really do anything? Am I still enough? Am I still okay? Then it's hard to accept things. And that's actually one of the reasons why in the book, I actually really spend a lot of time on saying like, hey, like really understand kind of how you're unique and what you have to offer and how that's different from anybody.
Right. Because it's going to be different from everybody else.
There is absolutely nobody on the planet that is exactly like you anywhere, anytime in history, moving backwards or forwards.
Yep. I agree.
Like when you think about it, it's profound.
Maybe
right?
Richard.
I mean, Richard will have a clone sometime in the future. We hope if the cryogenics work correctly, there will be a Richard later.
Hey, you could be a twin. Yeah,
they're right. He could be a twin.
I have worked with twins. The two of my partners in Strange Loop, oddly enough, because they were twins, there was two of them. Were mirror twins, and honestly, they could not have been more different.
Yeah.
Really remarkable, actually.
One of them was identical, but you really couldn't tell which one because they looked so much alike. So,
and after working with I bumped into them both at a party just a few months ago, and after working with them for 10 years, still mixed them up.
Stop it.
Oh no. And then the only difference between then and now is that I just confessed too. It's like, oh my God, I can't believe.
Wow.
That's hilarious. You just say both of their names at the same time. Hi, Jenna.
Yeah.
And, you know, parents of identical twins usually name them something like Tim and Tom, or, you know, Jane and Joan. Yeah. And so you can always say Tim Tom or Jane Jones.
Nice.
Joan.
Come up with a name that means whichever one you are.
One he is. The both he is. Absolutely.
Nice.
But yeah, thank you. I'm glad that you pointed that out, Richard, because I think that is, I mean, it's one of kind of a lot of different things that I think that are really really powerful tools. Really, really, you know, things that will be helpful for people. They dive into it and actually practice them can actually cause a lot of really positive change.
Yeah, this is a really effective tool. And I don't think this is said enough either, although it's said very well in the book, but I don't think we've said it here. Self-compassion.
Yeah.
Right.
We're not very kind to ourselves. We're often kind to others more than we are to ourselves.
Absolutely.
This goes hand in hand with the sort of rampant narcissism that's in the Facebook culture, you know, or the social media culture. And I think it's not because that we were born this way. I think that our environment has sort of made us this way. Mm-hmm. What it means is that a lot of people can't take criticism without taking it personally. Because, you know, we tend to surround ourselves in our social media circles with people that agree with us, so we're not used to being challenged. And so a challenge is taken as a personal slam. And, you know, this may be a generational thing, but I think it just is the people who grew up using the internet, using social media. There's some good books on this topic, too. But, you know, so you're speaking to these people, Denise, and it must be a breath of fresh air to hear this message that, you know, all of that stuff is an illusion.
Yeah. And I actually do talk about that it's, you know, it's really not about, first of all, we need to be kind to ourselves, and then we need to be kind to other people, right? That it's really important that we, you know, the stuff with the Facebook and the narcissism and all that stuff, I think is really just to cover up that people still don't really love themselves, and they're still looking for this external validation,
right?
And this kind of external, like, am I okay? I'm okay, right? Like, I'm making all these videos and I'm taking a selfie every day and making a duck face, and like, it's because I'm pretty, right? I'm valuable, I'm good looking, I'm successful.
Yeah.
And it's like when you get to a place where you start to do that to yourself, you don't need it as much from other people. And then it's also easier to give people that admiration, those accolades, that appreciation, and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Because it's like once your own cup is filled up,
right,
then it's like, then you can give to other people. And that's part of actually what the goal with this book is, to, like, you know, for those of us who've kind of been walking around feeling like our cup is only half full and then beating ourselves up because it's like, you know, because of all those messages, I'm not good enough, and I'm not this, and I got to do this, and I got to do more, and I got to be more in order for other people to value me. It's like, oh, no, let's turn it all inside. Let's just, you know, like, get all internal for a moment.
Yeah.
Fill yourself up. And then you can start to take what you have, that bolstered sense of self, and then you can start actually helping other people.
Denise, do you want to give away a copy of your book? Maybe we can get people to tweet the URL to it and pick a random person or something like that.
Absolutely. They will be getting the book next month, but I'd be happy to do that. Absolutely.
Show comes out on June 1 and the book releases June 6. So I think the timing's pretty good.
Yep, it's pretty good. Yeah. So absolutely. I would love to give a copy of the book away. It'd be my pleasure.
So we want to tell them what to tweet and how to do it?
Yeah. Let's see. I guess they can tweet. I'd love a copy of the book. And they could tweet to me, Denise Jacobs. And if they hashtag by Inner Critic and put in the URL to the book, which is innercriticbook.com.
Great.
That'd be great.
Awesome.
Yeah. I'll choose one of those at random and I will gift them a book.
Great idea.
All right.
Well, that's great, Denise. Thank you for spending this time with us.
Thank you so much for having me. This was really fun. It was really we went there. We got all deep in it.
Always fun to talk to you. And we'll see you next time on .NET Rocks. .NET Rocks is brought to you by Franklin's Net and produced by Pwop Studios, a full-service audio, video, and post-production facility located physically in New London, Connecticut, and of course in the cloud. Online at pwop.com. Visit our website at dotnetrocks.com for RSS feeds, downloads, mobile apps, comments, and access to the full archives going back to show number 1, recorded in September 2002. And make sure you check out our sponsors. They keep us in business. Now go write some code. See you next time.
Got a transmitter banned by the FCC. Yes, I'm a